Order, please. We'll commence the daily routine. Presenting and reading of petitions. Presenting reports of committees. The Honourable the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Chairman of the Committee on Law Amendments, I'm directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bill. Bill number 45, an act to amend Chapter 81 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Companies Act. The committee recommends this bill to the favorable consideration of the House with certain amendments.
Committee of the Whole House on Bills. Refer this bill to the Committee of the Whole House on Bills. The Honourable the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Chairman of the Committee on Law Amendments, I'm directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bills. Bill number 24, an act respecting dental hygienists. Bill number 31, an act to amend Chapter 10 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Medical Act. The committee recommends this bill to the favorable consideration of the House without amendments.
Order that these bills be referred to the Committee of the Whole House. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notices of motion. The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas to remember the true reason for this special season, we need to look no further than a teenager right in our own capital. And whereas instead of spending all his spare time playing video games or focusing on what was coming his way for Christmas, Matt Burke spent the last several months collecting footwear to donate to a homeless shelter to keep the feet of those less fortunate warm this winter. And whereas this past weekend he delivered 250 pair of shoes to the Metro Turning Point Shelter with the assistance of many generous donors in his community and beyond. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House salute the selfless efforts of this outstanding Nova Scotian who has shown that he carries the true spirit of Christmas in his heart all year round. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Premier.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Pen Growth will soon celebrate a quarter century in business, and whereas the company has played a significant role in the development of our offshore as well as our onshore and our people and communities, and whereas special thanks go to CEO Jim Kinnear for taking such a personal interest in the success of our energy sector development and investing in Nova Scotians through initiatives like the Pen Growth Nova Scotia Energy Scholarship Program. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Pen Growth as it celebrates such a significant milestone and thank its team for their investments in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this government is committed to supporting Nova Scotian families, and we have developed a 10-year early learning and child care plan in consultation with various stakeholders, from parents to child care workers, to help us keep that promise. And whereas part of that commitment is not only helping to provide quality child care, but to also ensure awareness and information about child care options for parents. And whereas parents of daycare-age children can now more easily identify licensed child care centres around the province with the help of a new government-developed symbol, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House applaud the highly skilled and appreciated work that child care centre staff provide every day for Nova Scotia children, and encourage families to look for this new symbol for licensed child care centres, which reinforces the quality of the daycare and provides assurances of regular inspections to uphold that quality. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin, I just want to thank my honourable colleague for Halifax Halifax Atlantic that joined the event that I'll speak of today. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on December 10, 1948, members of the United Nations adopted a Universal Declaration of Human Rights to ensure that the inherent dignity of every person is valued and protected, and proclaimed December 10th International Human Rights Day, which is celebrated across the province and the world every year. And whereas the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission and Partners for Human Rights continue to hold an annual International Human Rights Day celebration to remind Nova Scotians of the importance of human rights for everyone, and whereas the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission has recognized Janice Smith, co-chair of the Uniacke Square Tenants Association and the Cole Harbour Boys and Girls Club, with Human Rights Awards for their contributions to countering racism and discrimination in our communities, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly recognize today as International Human Rights Day and encourages all Nova Scotians to promote and protect human rights in their communities, and congratulates the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission and Partners for Human Rights on another successful event. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister for Emergency Management.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Royal Canadian Mounted Police have been a vital partner in the success of our province-wide 911 program, and whereas in July of this year they celebrated the grand opening of their Operational Communications Centre in Truro, and whereas it is within the facility that 911 call takers handle more than 40% of all 911 calls. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House acknowledge the partnership of the RCMP in providing this vital service to the citizens of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the American Bus Association's top 100 events in North America is an annual summary of the best events for group travel in the United States and Canada, and whereas winners are chosen from hundreds of celebrations, festivals, fairs, and commemorable events, and whereas the Royal Nova Scotia International Tattoo was named #1 on the list announced by the ABA in September, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House recognize and congratulate the organizers, volunteers, and participants of the Royal Nova Scotia International Tattoo for their incredible contribution to tourism in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Cattle Producers Association represents the cattle industry in the province, and Ruth Kaiser has been the consistent and steady voice of this organization and its predecessors for 30 years. And whereas Ruth Kaiser has decided to join the wonderful world of retirement after many years of service to this organization as the office manager who ran the budget, responded to the inquiries, and assisted the board chair and the president, and whereas Ruth Kaiser will be missed by all involved with the Nova Scotia Cattle Producers Association and the industry, not only because of her depth of knowledge, but because of her sincere personality. Therefore, be it resolved that MLAs congratulate Ruth Kaiser on her 30-year service to Nova Scotia's cattle industry and offer her best wishes on a well-deserved retirement. And Mr. Speaker, I do seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day to move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in May of 2007, the College of Registered Nurses of Nova Scotia held their annual awards banquet in Dartmouth to present the Excellence in Nursing Administration Award, which recognizes recipients for promoting nursing practices by awarding a positive role model, demonstrating strong leadership and empowering other nurses to perform to the best of their abilities. And whereas Bertha Brandon, RN Administrator for Nikhil Home for Special Care since 1989, is well known throughout the nursing community for providing continuing education sessions to RNs as a college facilitator in the Western region and for facilitating a common or community grief support group. And whereas Bertha Brandon was nominated for the award by the nurses of Nikhil because they believe that Nikhil has an exceptional reputation and is a healthy workplace due to her leadership and vision. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating Bertha Brandon for her excellence in nursing administration, for her dedication, diligence, and guidance to the residents and staff of Nikhil Home for Special Care, and encourage her to continue her work for many years to come. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister for Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia, the Honourable Mayanne E. Francis, announced in her inaugural speech last year her commitment to advancing two areas of interest, recognizing healthy communities and the wisdom of elders. And whereas an award, the Lieutenant Governor's Intergenerational Award, was created by the Department of Seniors to foster interaction and bonding between Nova Scotians of different ages by celebrating and promoting inspiring intergenerational programs existing in communities across the province. And whereas the Rotary Club of Halifax sponsors the outstanding volunteer group, therefore be it resolved that all members of the House congratulate the Urban Farm Museum Society of Spryfield for promoting intergenerational events and activities within their community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Landscape Nova Scotia Horticulture Trades Association recently held its Awards of Excellence Gala in Halifax, and whereas the ornamental sector is the single largest sector in horticulture and represents a farm gate value of $2.1 billion annually, and with a value added is worth around $12 billion annually and employs people from Yarmouth to Sydney. And whereas the landscape horticulture industry has a commitment to the preservation of a sustainable environment and is one of the fastest growing sectors in agriculture, therefore be it resolved that all members of this legislature congratulate the Landscape Nova Scotia Horticulture Trades Association and all award winners and wish them continued growth and success in the coming new year. And Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without delay.
Has there been a request for waiver? Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Tourism,
Thank
Culture
you,
and Heritage.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Tourism Industry Association of Canada hosted their National Awards for Tourism Excellence on November 5th in Victoria, British Columbia, and whereas the awards attracted national attention within the tourism community for celebrating Canada's best tourist products, service, and people, and whereas the event of the year was presented to Cape Breton Celtic Colours International Festival, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Celtic Colours International Festival for its achievement and for bringing national, I say national and international awareness to music and the culture of Nova Scotia. I request waiver. Thank you.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce an act to amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled, An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Bill 93, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Establish a Poverty Reduction Strategy Working Group in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Establish a Poverty Reduction Strategy Working Group in Nova Scotia.
Bill 94, entitled An Act to Establish a Poverty Reduction Strategy Working Group in Nova Scotia.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The Honourable, the Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Require a Consultation Process Respecting the Accessibility of Mental Health Care Services in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Require a Consultation Process Respecting the Accessibility of Mental Health Care Services in Nova Scotia.
Bill 95, entitled An Act to Require a Consultation Process Respecting the Accessibility of Mental Health Care Services in Nova Scotia.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The Honourable, the Member for Cape Breton South.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'll be introducing this bill on behalf of my colleague from Halifax Clayton Park. I beg leave to introduce a bill and act to amend Chapter 300 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Municipal Elections Act, to prohibit provincial plebiscites in conjunction with municipal elections.
The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 300 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Municipal Elections Act, to prohibit provincial plebiscites in conjunction with municipal elections.
Bill 96, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 300 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Municipal Elections Act, to prohibit provincial plebiscites in conjunction with municipal elections.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The Honourable, the Member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
The honourable member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Bill 97, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 31 of the Acts of 1996, the Sales Tax Act.
Any more? The honourable member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 31 of the Acts of 1996, the Sales Tax Act.
Bill 98, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 31 of the Acts of 1996, the Sales Tax Act.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill titled An Act to Amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Gaming Control Act.
The honourable member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Gaming Control Act.
Bill 99, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Gaming Control Act.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. Notices of motion. The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on December 10th, Human Rights Day is observed across Canada and throughout the international community, and whereas thousands of people will participate in a letter-writing campaign called Right for Rights in support of Amnesty International and human rights around the world. And whereas Cole Harbour District High School student Jessica Camo is organizing a massive one-day letter-writing campaign event at her school where students, teachers, and many others will join together to produce about 1,300 letters to champion the issue of human rights. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly commend Jessica Camo for leading the Right for Rights event at Cole Harbour District High School on December 10th, and extend congratulations to her for bringing together students, teachers, and others to participate in a letter-writing campaign to focus on human rights issues around the globe. And, Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the Member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas it has been 50 years since the remarkable Canadian Lester Bowles Pearson was honoured with the 1957 Nobel Peace Prize for establishing an international police force to resolve the 1956 Suez Crisis, and whereas this in effect created the UN's first designated peacekeeping mission and the blueprint for the UN's now well-recognized role in peacekeeping, whereas throughout his career and lifetime, Pearson was a strong advocate of the UN's role in peacekeeping, firmly believing that Canada had a responsibility and active participation in any international activity that would lessen the chances of war and end ongoing conflict. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly recognize the significant role Lester B. Pearson played, not only as one of Canada's greatest prime ministers, but also as an international statesman with a vision for peace. I would ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the Member for Pictou Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas earlier this summer, Summer Street Industries in New Glasgow held its 13th annual Summer Street Scramble, whereas the popular golf tournament raised an impressive $125,000 for the well-known charity that provides work in a supportive community for those living with intellectual challenges. Whereas for the 13th consecutive year, CIBC Wood Gundy has entered a team, and this year Howie Anderson, David Whittlemore, Mark Comeau, John Forbes, and Manaz Bora raised an outstanding $29,700 in donations. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House send their congratulations and thank you to the Summer Street Industries on yet another successful fundraising event, and to CIBC Wood Gundy for his continuous support of this important Pictou County charity. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Hants East. The Honourable Member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas preparation to ward off or minimize disaster shows concern for loved ones, as well as a realization that disasters don't always just happen to others. And whereas Mr. Kenton Gilby of Enfield had the foresight to prepare an evacuation plan and rehearse it with his children in fear of a fire in their home. And whereas the morning of December 2nd saw Mr. Gilby's son Jacob put that plan into action when he not only got himself and his cousins out of the basement where fire erupted, but additionally, upon exiting the home, put a ladder to his sister's window, waking her in order that she escape the home as well. Therefore, be resolved that this House Assembly commend Kenton Gilby for his foresight in preparing his family for disaster, and applaud the bravery of Jacob Gilby, whose efforts helped save members of his family. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the Member for Richmond.
Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Human Rights Day 2007 marks the start of a year-long commemoration of the 60th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Whereas since its adoption in 1948, the Declaration has been and continues to be a source of inspiration for national and international efforts to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms. Whereas the theme for 2008, Dignity and Justice for All of Us, reinforces the vision of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a commitment to universal dignity and justice. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly recognize December 10th as Human Rights Day and continue to support such important mandates declared by the United Nations. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and if I may be permitted to do an introduction prior to bringing forward my resolution.
Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the gallery this evening is a constituent from Victoria the Lakes, Mr. Ken Jardine. Ken is here to observe the workings of the House, and I would ask that he please rise and receive the warm welcome of the House. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Honour Roll, a book written about Nova Scotia's Highland Brigade, was unveiled this summer, and whereas Honour Roll was written by Bedex James MacDonald and is a compilation of names and details on the brigade soldiers who died while serving in the First World War, and whereas Mr. MacDonald attempted to name every soldier, noting that more than 700 individuals are named in the book with their date of birth, family origin, vocation along with enlistment details, and the date and location where they were killed in action along with their final resting place. Therefore, be it resolved that MLAs in this House of Assembly, through this resolution, applaud Bedex James MacDonald for his penmanship and his 2-year effort in compiling this integral component of Cape Breton history. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Pictou waterfront-based lobster stock enhancement research project has been an outstanding success in its first year, raising 25,000 lobster larvae to stage 4 for release into the Northumberland Strait. And whereas the Northumberland Fishermen's Association was the driving force behind the hatchery and contributing $84,000 to cover construction and initial operating costs. And whereas other fishing groups have expressed an interest in their project, including most recently the 20,000-member Fish, Food and Allied Worker Union from Newfoundland. Therefore, be resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate the Northumberland Fishermen's Association on their new initiative and wish them, along with manager Keith Munsey and biologist Roy Parker, continued successes. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on November 4, 2007 marked the 5th year anniversary service of Foundation United Baptist Church in Porters Lake. And whereas Reverend Earl MacDonald gave praise and thanks to all those who attended the service and for those who have contributed to the success of the new building. And whereas the church is still and will continue to be an important and stable symbol to the community. Therefore, be it resolved that members of House of Assembly congratulate the Foundation United Baptist Church on celebrating its 5th anniversary in its new building and wish there many more years of success to come. And I ask for waiver.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dill Road resident Dr. Howard Whiteman, a practicing cardiologist since 1991 in Kempville, and staff from the Valley Regional Hospital's Cardiology Department provide an entertaining and informative educational session to students of local schools every year during Heart Health Month, which is in February. And whereas Dr. Whiteman attempts each and every time to provide younger students with a quick and easy understanding of what the heart actually is and how to keep it healthy. And whereas with November being CPR Awareness Month, it is important to recognize there are approximately 40,000 cardiac arrests each year in Canada, and 80% of them occur outside of hospitals, while claiming in excess of 50,000 lives annually. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly applaud Dr. Whiteman and his staff for their ongoing efforts to promote heart health at an early stage in life. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Southwest Properties is a Halifax-based development company that owns and operates a wide variety of properties throughout Atlantic Canada, and whereas Southwest Properties has been a finalist for the past 2 years for the Better Business Bureau of the Maritime Province's Maritime Business Ethics Award, whereas Southwest Properties founder and CEO Jim Spatz was recently inducted into the Nova Scotia Business Hall of Fame, along with his late father Simon Spatz. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Jim Spatz and Southwest Properties on their business and community successes.
I'm having difficulty hearing the member. The Honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Jim Spatz and Southwest Properties on their business and community successes and applaud them on being a model of ethical business practices and corporate social responsibility. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Linda Hanrahan, a resident of Glace Bay and a volunteer with the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation, organized an auction in Glace Bay on May 25th of this year. And whereas Linda has one sister who is a breast cancer survivor and lost another to the disease, which prompted her to become personally involved with the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation. And whereas with the help of her husband Roger, Linda traveled to many businesses and locations in Cape Breton to obtain donations. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of the House of Assembly congratulate Linda Hanrahan for her many years of tireless fundraising efforts, as well as her dedication to the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Pictou Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture Environmental Monitoring Program team has done an incredible amount of work over the past 3 years, implementing the first comprehensive program for more than 330 marine aquaculture sites throughout Nova Scotia. And whereas recently the team was singled out for its work ensuring that aquaculture is environmentally sustainable in Nova Scotia at the Premier's Award of Excellence dinner and ceremony held in Halifax earlier this year. And whereas Pictou County native Alan J. McNeil was one of the 9-person team recognized for its innovative and effective program that is not only a first for the province, but a first for the industry. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Alan J. McNeil and his 8 teammates for their important work in aquaculture. The team's work has attracted interest from across Canada and as far away as Chile and Norway. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas it's important that we express our gratitude to healthcare professionals around the province, and whereas the dedicated healthcare team at the Inverness Consolidated Memorial Hospital provides day surgery services to residents of the surrounding area, and whereas the ability to get day surgery services as close to home as possible is a benefit to all communities. Therefore, be resolved that this House of Assembly extend our appreciation to the healthcare team by providing day surgery at the Inverness Consolidated Memorial Hospital for keeping quality care in their communities. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Clare.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on September 29th, the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation held its 8th annual CIBC Run for the Cure in Church Point in West Pubnico, and whereas Belleville Motors co-sponsored the annual Run for the Cure again this year, and whereas this year's run raised $16,288 for breast cancer research, education programs, and treatments, therefore be resolved that members of this House of Assembly extend our gratitude and best wishes to Belleville Motors for their active role, as well as the countless volunteers and participants who make the national campaign against breast cancer possible each year. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the North Victoria Support Services Society is celebrating their 25th anniversary in 2007, and whereas the North Victoria Support Services Society offers an array of support to individuals wanting to stay and establish business connections in the local area, and whereas Service Canada's manager in North Sydney, Bernadette Theriault, believes strongly that the North Victoria Support Services Society brings services closer to the people. Therefore, be it resolved, the former director of the North Victoria Support Services Society, Mabel Best, present chair of the Board of Directors, Jody Stockley, along with all society directors, be applauded by all MLAs in the House today for their outstanding work ethic and wanting to make life better for individuals coming to see them about opportunities. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Shelburne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mrs. Lee Gorm Smith and her grade 5-6 students participated in a celebration concert April the 14th, 2007 at the Woods Harbor Calvary Baptist Church. And whereas a total of $11,640 has been donated to the IWK Grace Health Center over the past 4 years through school and community fundraising events. And whereas each year the students are invited to attend the telethon day to present their donation on live television, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Mrs. Lee Gorham Smith and her grade 5-6 students on all their hard work and dedication to raising donations on behalf of the IWK Children's Hospital, a truly inspiring act of children helping children. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the fishing industry has been the backbone of Nova Scotia's economy for nearly 400 years and hopefully will continue to be. Whereas Nova Scotia ground fishery is not recovering from its present downward cycle at no fault of the fishing industry. And whereas at recent World Science Fisheries Forum held in Halifax, it was stated that if the growing number of seals in Nova Scotia's coastal waters were not dealt with soon, we will see the complete collapse of our 400-year-old ground fishery. Therefore, be it resolved that this government take immediate necessary action to correct this problem before we see the end of our 400-year-old fishery and become an even bigger have-not province. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The member for Hants West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dr.
Order,
Abby...
please. Order. The noise level is creeping up and it's very hard to hear the speakers. The member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whereas Dr. Abby Caramera is the President and CEO of Biomedica Diagnostics in Windsor, and whereas Dr. Caramera was presented with a prestigious award on October 17th in London, England, at the London Science Museum as the 2007 Economist Magazine's Innovation Award recipient in the Bioscience category, and whereas Dr. Caramera was chosen as the magazine's Innovation Award recipient for his outstanding work in his research with regard to the development of rapid diagnostic HIV testing. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly recognize the significant innovative discovery, accomplishments of Dr. Abby Caramera, and wish him continued success as one of Nova Scotia's leading scientists. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Red Hat Society is a network of women dedicated to showing the world that there is fun after 50, with its formal mission to work towards higher visibility for women and to reshape the way they're viewed by today's culture, and whereas the Red Hatters Club offers fun, laughter, and friendship to senior women in our community, and whereas the Rambling Rosies chapter of the Red Hatters is active in the community of Eastern Passage and Cow Bay, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly acknowledge and encourage the endeavours of the Rambling Rosies chapter of the Red Hatters of Eastern Passage, Cow Bay. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during the coming year, the farm community in Nova Scotia, under the leadership of the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture Executive, will be challenging policymakers with a number of ideas and concepts directed at achieving a competitive and sustainable agricultural economy in Nova Scotia. And whereas at their 112th annual general meeting, farmers elected Willie Versteeg as their new president and spokesperson for the coming year, and whereas Mr. Versteeg owns and operates Barney Brook Farms, a dairy and raspberry operation located at Milford Station, and looks forward to a positive year of change and transition for Nova Scotia farmers. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly congratulate Willie Versteeg as the new president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture, and work with industry officials to ensure that our primary industries are a priority. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Antigonish resident Alice Hoskins received an honorary degree from St. FX, the degree Doctor of Laws honoris causa was conferred upon Alice Hoskins during fall convocation ceremonies this past weekend. And whereas Ms. Hoskins was honored as an artist, author, teacher, and philanthropist from Antigonish who has made significant contributions to her community and beyond. And whereas Alice Hoskins has inspired countless people with her dedication and passion as a lifelong learner, educator, and philanthropist. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating Dr. Alice on receiving her honorary degree. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Peerscape 2007, presented by the Whitney Peer Society for the Arts, was held from September 24th to the 30th in the community of Whitney Peer. Whereas 2007 marked the 10th anniversary of this renowned arts festival, and whereas the theme of this year's festival was 10 years of multicultural creativity. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate the Whitney Peer Society for the Arts on the celebration of their 10th anniversary and for their ongoing dedication and commitment to the arts community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Orenda Canoe Club was formed in 1977 so that the youth of Lake Echo could practice their sport in a place that they could call their own. And whereas recently the Orenda Canoe Club celebrated its 30th anniversary with a dinner, reuniting old friends, competitors, and coaches with an evening of reminiscing. And whereas to this day, the club is a thriving organization with approximately 150 members pursuing their love of canoeing and kayaking, setting many Canadian and world records. Therefore, be resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the Orenda Canoe Club on the 30th anniversary and thank them for providing a competitive training and fun environment for young people in the community. I'd ask for waiver.
There is a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Ralph Waldo Emerson is quoted as saying, in quote, "A walk is one of the secrets for dodging old age," end quote. And whereas Brookfield's Wayne Wolfett walks between 10 and 12 miles a day, and whereas Wayne is an avid sports enthusiast, and in 2006 was recognized by the Nova Scotia director of the Terry Fox Foundation for raising $1,200.50 toward cancer research. Therefore be it resolved, MLAs in this legislature recognize the healthy lifestyle exercised by Brookfield's Wayne Wolfett and wish him continued daily enjoyment with his daily walking. And Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas, with the help of the customers and various business throughout the Tri-County area, Guy Frenchies has raised significant funds for the IWK. And whereas this past year, Guy Frenchies has raised over $70,000 through various events coordinated by staff and volunteers from all their stores. And whereas the money from this year's activities will go to purchase an eye care system for the hospital, therefore be resolved that members of this House congratulate all those involved in the fundraising efforts of Guy Frenchies for the IWK. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Angela Johnson has been the owner of the Valley Cloth Diaper Company in Port Williams, Nova Scotia since October 2005, and whereas Environment Canada has declared cloth diapers as a superior choice to disposable diapers, and whereas Environment Canada's statement supports and helps validate the whole environmental philosophy behind the use of cloth diapers versus disposable ones, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House recognize Ms. Johnson's provision of a wise alternative throwaway attitudes for commitment to the promotion of healthy lifestyles and her environmentally friendly approach. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Digby Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Student Debating Federation is an organization of over 600 high schools across Canada devoted to promoting and coordinating debate and public speech activities. And whereas the Federation has encouraged educational debating and public speech for 35 years, and whereas the Canadian Student Debating Federation recently held their Canadian National Debating Week, which recognized the importance of debate and speech, therefore be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate the Canadian Student Debating Federation on its 35 years of achievement and extend its best wishes for continued success. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a Lieutenant Governor's Medal is presented to a high school student who demonstrates leadership, service, and commendable academic performance. Whereas Robin Whitman was selected for the 2007 Lieutenant Governor's Medal and is one of the 2 students chosen for this award at Charles P. Allen High in Bedford. Whereas Robin has been chosen by Charles P. Allen for having shown commendable performance in each of the areas highlighted by the award. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize Robin, who has demonstrated a high quality of leadership and service in school and in the community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Ron Leach, Michael Ozu, Mark Whittier, and Ken Barrett are climbing Mount Aconcagua in Argentina to raise funds for Campaign for Kids, and whereas Campaign for Kids is a non-profit organization which has been providing Kings County residents with essential skills for families, including training in positive parenting, medical support for summer camps, and child abuse prevention. And whereas these 4 individuals are mapping their progress and posting updates using computers and satellite technology, and one of their goals is to have kids actively involved by mirroring their efforts by using climbing walls and running cross-country to match their distance. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly applaud the efforts of Ron Leach, Michael Ozu, Mark Whittier, and Ken Barrett and their quest to raise funds for Campaign for Kids program. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 4-H clubs are recognized for the excellent programs they provide for young people. And whereas Lunenburg County 4-H members are provided the opportunity to learn, improve, and demonstrate public speaking skills. And whereas the 2007 Lunenburg County 4-H Rally held a public speaking contest for its members. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House congratulate Logan Huskelson of the Lapland 4-H Club on his participation in the public speaking competition. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Orders of the day. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call government business public bills for third reading?
Public bills for third reading.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Will you please call Bill number 27, the Hospitals Act?
Bill number 27, the Hospitals Act.
I hope he's in his chair. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. If we could go to Bill number 39, the Rental Property Conversion Act.
Bill number 39, the Rental Property Conversion Act. The Honourable the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to rise once again to speak about the Rental Property Conversion Act, Bill number 39. And what I'm going to do is simply to remind members of some of the comments I made during the second reading, and then I will be moving third reading. Just to refresh the members' memories that the concept of condominiums really entered the real estate market in a fairly big way back in the 1980s, although there was a building in Halifax that was sole-purpose condominium built back in the 70s. And at that time, condominiums became a big thing. A lot of landlords considered converting their rental units into condos. And this Rental Property Conversion Act was then created to protect tenants from being suddenly displaced from their living arrangements with very few options. And what it does, Mr. Speaker, the Act gives tenants the right to remain for an extended 12-month period following notification from the landlord of a proposed conversion. In Nova Scotia, generally 3 or 4 conversions a year at this time, but the number of units that can be affected by conversion can be significant, depending on the size, obviously, of the apartment building. And if the result of a conversion, you ended up with 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 families looking for housing in a specific neighborhood at the same time, probably the chances of them finding suitable accommodations within the necessary time frame would be minimal. So anyway, because of this, there were consultations with landlords, and we also received some feedback from the real estate community, and there are a number of amendments to the existing legislation were developed, first of all, to clarify the information that had to be filed by a landlord who was seeking to convert his or her property. Secondly, to specify that the notification requirements, and clarify that the 12-month extension, which I previously mentioned, begins on the proposed date of conversion. Now, I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that these amendments aren't intended to restrict or prohibit the conversion of rental properties. It's simply intended to provide tenants with enough time to find adequate housing. And what this amendment does, Mr. Speaker, it does create certainty. No longer will landlords or tenants be uncertain as to when the 12-month notice begins. And I should add as well, Mr. Speaker, that these amendments also apply to mobile home parks. When landlords seek to close their mobile home parks, once again, the tenants are entitled to 12 months notification of these closures. Mr. Speaker, these amendments will help make the Act clearer and easier to follow for everybody, and they do so without weakening the protection in place for tenants or landlords. Mr. Speaker, with those few comments, I move third reading of Bill number 39.
The Honourable the Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too arise tonight to speak on the Rental Property Conversion Act, Mr. Speaker, I think it's a good idea with these amendments to the Act for people that have been there for a long time, a long period of time, whether they've been in a rental agreement or in a mobile home or trailer park, that they would have the options of having 12 months at the day of the proposed conversion. I think it's a good thing that it's a minimum time. But what I worry about sometimes is the older families and older people that have been there for many, many years. You know, this 12 months will give them actual time, and maybe we can help them in some way or something to find new living arrangements, Mr. Speaker. And I, too, am in agreement with the amendments in this bill and look forward to this becoming law for protection of tenants that find themselves in these situations. And now it's clear that the proposed conversion date will be the date of the 12 months given to the tenants that are living there in the trailers or the rental properties turned into condominiums. So I, too, Mr. Speaker, will look forward to this bill becoming enacted.
The Honourable the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia.
I want to thank the member from Cape Breton Oval for those supportive observations, and I now close debate on third reading of Bill number 39, the Rental Property Conversion Act.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried.
Bill 39, titled An Act to Amend Chapter 399 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Rental Property Conversion Act.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the titles be as read by the clerk. Order that the bills be engrossed. The Honourable the Government House Leader, Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 27, the Hospitals Act?
Bill number 27, the Hospitals Act.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a pretty easy one, so I move third reading of Bill number 27, the Hospitals Act.
Ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried.
Bill 27, title An Act to Amend Chapter 208 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Hospitals Act.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable the Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 41, the Municipal Government Act?
Bill number 41, the Municipal Government Act. The Honourable the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise again to say a few words about Bill number 41, the Municipal Government Act. As everyone in the House knows, the MGA is the legislation that lays out the framework used by municipalities to govern their citizens. And at this time, at the request of the Halifax Regional Municipality, province is providing it with the authority to where the municipality believes it will make the most impact. And the amendment will allow an agreement reached between HRM and the Halifax Regional School Board to move forward and to take effect. And at the same time, Speaker, the amendment to the Act will give municipalities the authority to assign more accurate civic addresses to parks and recreational areas, or indeed areas which do not have dwellings. Mr. Speaker, the present legislation said that civic address could only be provided to properties with structures, and this obviously, it makes sense that with all the emphasis in recreation and fields and all of these things these days, that if some emergency should occur, as that these properties to be designated by a civic address. So, Mr. Speaker, the amendments which we have submitted are the direct result of consultation with the municipality stakeholder groups and other provincial departments. And I guess, Mr. Speaker, in summary, I'd say that the amendments to the MGA are a clear example of the positive steps we need to take if we are to continue to strengthen local government to build a stronger Nova Scotia for the future. And Mr. Speaker, With those few words, I move third reading of Bill number 41, the Municipal Government Act.
The Honourable, the member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise tonight in support of Bill number 41, the Act to amend the Municipal Government Act. Certainly support the provision of civic numbers on vacant lots. I think this is an important health and safety issue that needs to be addressed. As well as the Honourable Minister noted, it is a strengthening of local government, and the Halifax Regional School Board and HRM have struggled with supplementary funding for many number of years. This provision will allow for some betterment to the students that are under their care. But I just want, for the record, Mr. Speaker, to note as well, again, I do feel that this is a Band-Aid to a larger issue of an unnecessary drain on taxpayers. I don't believe that the HRM taxpayers should have to pay this tax. The government, I believe, it should be appropriately funding education in our schools, fairly funding them within the Halifax Regional School Board and HRM. I want that for the record, but in the meantime, I and my caucus will be supporting this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with pleasure I rise to speak on this bill. The minister's got a nervous look over there when I stand up and speak about this bill. He doesn't have to be this evening, but the truth of the matter is, as my honourable colleague has indicated, this funding should not come from the taxpayers. It should come from the province of Nova Scotia. There should be no supplementary funding in Halifax Regional Municipality, and it's been unevenly distributed in the past. And with the change that's been put in place in the rural areas now, there's going to be a significant, and I mean a significant increase in property taxes in the rural area, which will have a detrimental effect on so many people that are retired and on fixed income. It's going to be devastating to some people. And as the tax rate increases in HRM, which it has increased dramatically through assessments, and some people have had 4 times increase in their property taxes in the last few years, totally due to assessment. This is only going to drive our property tax up higher. There's going to be more and more people dropping into our offices trying to struggle with the battle of paying their mortgage with the high property taxes in there. And it's time the province took on the responsibility 100% of education and provide our children with the badly needed funding that's needed for our schools to ensure they have the materials. I can remember giving a couple of bundles of papers, 1,000 sheets of printer paper to a parent one time. It was on the school advisory board, and I thought that I gave her $100,000. They had no paper to run their photocopiers with. It was just unbelievable. And this is what's been happening in the Halifax Regional School Board, and it's very difficult for the teachers to do their jobs, very difficult for the children if they don't have the supplies to deal with the issues. And I know the former Minister of Education, now the Minister of Service Nova Scotia, has tried to tackle this problem in the past, and I appreciate that effort. But indeed, we have to do many more things in this regard to ensure that our children have every advantage they possibly have to get the best possible education in today's very competitive world. And again, I stress that this is a regressive tax, and it really doesn't do anything to cure the root problem of inadequate funding from the province.
Thank you. The motion is for third reading on Bill number 27. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carries.
Bill 41. It's Bill 41, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act.
Oh, Bill 41, pardon me. Thank you. Order that this bill do pass. Order that the title be read by the clerk. In order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 43, the Municipal Elections Act?
Bill number 43. The Honourable, the Minister for Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, the changes to the municipal government, the Municipal Elections Act, are a result of a review process which occurs each time municipal election is heard. In light of feedback that we get from municipal returning officers. And the last review was during the 2004 municipal election, and what happened was the department listened to the concerns that these knowledgeable people expressed, and because of these concerns and appeared to have a great deal of validity, the changes were submitted to the House for approval. What happens to change the act that have been proposed, Mr. Speaker, will give councils more flexibility by allowing for different ways of public notification about elections. It will align procedures in municipal elections with provincial and federal electoral practices by providing and using common language and guidelines. Further clarify the term electronic voting, and that is one which did attract probably more interest than any other part of this bill. Next, to define and clarify process involving school board elections and to keep the legislation current. And along with the amendments, Mr. Speaker, the department has taken the opportunity to clarify and update some of the language that appears in the Act, because strengthening local government is and will continue to be one of the major focuses of the Department of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. And Mr. Speaker, again with those few comments, I'm pleased to move third reading of Bill number 43, the Municipal Elections Act.
The honourable member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Path.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I rise this evening to support Bill number 43 to amend the Municipal Elections Act. Much of what is in this act are really housekeeping amendments and relatively uncontentious. I am pleased to see on the enabling legislation go forward. I think in this day and age, the electronic age, that voting opportunities will increase. I would like, though, to note that I think it's important for those municipalities that will take advantage of this to exercise caution and give much thought and due diligence to the safeguards that are required, Mr. Speaker, for this type of opportunity, as they would put in all voting methods, quite frankly. But these are serious concerns in a day of electronics, and you hear of horror stories out there, Mr. Speaker, of things that can go wrong, and I just encourage them to be very thoughtful and mindful of those and take the due diligence required to put these safeguards in place. But overall, Mr. Speaker, I and my caucus, we believe that this is a hope that will increase voter participation, and it's a responsible bill, and I can support it. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is for third reading on Bill number 43. Ready for the question? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried.
Bill 43, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 300 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Municipal Elections Act.
Order that this bill do pass. Order that the title be read by the clerk. In order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 49, the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act?
Bill number 49, the Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to rise on behalf of the Minister of Human Resources, who wanted to pass her thanks on to everyone on their support of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I would like to move a third reading of Bill number 49, the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too rise on the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act, Mr. Speaker. We in the legislature, I've said this before when this bill was being debated before it went to law amendments, that this bill came about because of a Supreme Court decision in June, Mr. Speaker. And casual workers now in the province of Nova Scotia, after working 10 weeks, will receive benefits. So it'll be another approximately, I heard, about 2,000 members of the NSGEU now with benefits and medical and dental, and that's a good thing for workers in our province, Mr. Speaker. And this is a good bill, and I wholeheartedly support this bill, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Pictou East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I too rise in support of Bill 49. I would like to just take a moment to thank the Nova Scotia Government Employees Union and CUPE, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, for keeping this issue alive for so long. Now, Mr. Speaker, I would like to think that I played a small role in this issue by bringing it to the attention of several ministers, two in particular, along with the natural resource critic from the Liberal Party, the member for Kings West. And we on a number of occasions put forward our views in relationship to this issue with the Minister of Natural Resources, because many of the employees that are affected by this are in fact natural resources staff. And Mr. Speaker, I would also like to think that this came about through the efforts repeatedly of hundreds and hundreds of workers who pointed out the tremendous discrepancies that existed with the way the system operated. However, the reality of this is that it came about because of a decision, a Supreme Court decision in another jurisdiction in this great land. So the British Columbia Supreme Court decision is Supreme Court of Canada decision in British Columbia is where the government was finally forced to act on this issue. But the situation is that in natural resources, we saw on many occasions people doing the same job. Two enforcement officers, for example, traveling in the same vehicle, one being paid a fair rate and another not much more than the minimum wage. And the other side of that was not just related to wages, but we had a situation where one person had a health program and another person did not. One person had a pension program and another person did not. We are very pleased, regardless of how this came about. I'm glad, I'm even elated that this has come forward. I'm sorry that it has taken so many years, because some of these people were in fact in the positions that they were in for up to 30 years and beyond. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to bring this to a close. I don't want to hold it up any longer. I'm going to take my place, but I hope this comes into place very, very quickly. I hope that this is proclaimed quickly and that this great injustice is finally going to be behind us, and the blur on our record, on our human resources record, will be wiped out. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise this evening on third reading of Bill 49. It is a very, very good piece of legislation that has finally come to the floor of the Assembly here. It's been a long time in the making. While we know that the Supreme Court decision in BC had an impact, but I would have to say, in my view, while the critic of the official opposition, along with myself and the Minister of Natural Resources, had a number of key meetings to present this to the minister affected. I would have to say that more than anything, perhaps the tenacity of the workers affected, I think, were key to having this piece of legislation come before us. One of the things that was happening in that vital area of tourism workers, natural resource workers, was that they were highly skilled, loved their jobs, but were certainly being having opportunities elsewhere for full-time employment. So I think it's going to plug an enormous problem for the casual workers. So with that, Mr. Speaker, moving this forward and into the next season of casual workers is a very, very important. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too am going to speak in support of this bill. I think it's a great thing. Many people in my area that work for natural resources in particular were deprived of many benefits that they should have had, and I want to commend my colleagues for working very hard on this and making a difference in employees' status. Many of these people are very experienced and provide excellent service to us as Nova Scotians, and indeed help our tourism industry, as well as helping enforcement and so many other things on a casual basis. And they are as valuable as the full-time employees, and I'm pleased to see that is happening and will happen, and hopefully this bill will be proclaimed very soon so the employees can take advantage of this and feel as though they're a part of the province. And in today's society, it's hard to believe that we've so many years getting this in place. This is something like you would see someone from a business trying to do, and not a government. And I'm pleased to see that now the government has realized that, along with my colleagues that have helped make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion is for a third reading on Bill number 49. Is the House ready for the question? Question. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried.
Bill 49, title and act to amend Chapter 71 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Civil Service Collective Bargaining Act.
Order that this bill do pass. Order that the title be read by the clerk. In order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 52, the Credit Union Act?
Bill number 52, the Honourable, the Acting Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this bill be now read for the third time.
Questions? Motion is for third reading on Bill number 52. Is the House ready for the question? Question. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried.
52, entitled an act to amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 1994, the Credit Union Act.
Order that this bill do pass. Order that the title be read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 11, the Civil Forfeitures Act?
Bill number 11, the Honourable, the Minister responsible for health promotion and protection.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Justice, I'm pleased to move third reading for Bill number 11, the Civil Forfeitures Act.
Any speakers? The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you. As the Justice Critic for the NDP, I would entertain the fact that this is a bill that should proceed in the third reading. I would like to thank again the Department of Justice for their patience in dealing with this ex-school principal with the details of civil forfeiture. It's an entanglement process that I have much to learn about yet, but it's a piece of legislation that we are willing to support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Motion is for third reading on Bill number 11. Is the House ready for the question? Question. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried.
Title and act respecting civil forfeiture of property.
Order that this bill do pass. Order that the title be read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 12, the Evidence Act?
Bill number 12, the Honourable, the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Justice, I'm pleased to move third reading for Bill number 12, the Evidence Act.
The Honourable, the Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you. This is an important piece of legislation. The government has responded to a need, in particular when it comes to electronic court documents. And it is testimony to the fact that there are good things that come out of terrible disasters because of Teresa McAvoy's terrible tragedy, because of the recommendations of Justice Merlin Nunn. This particular legislation has come forward, and I think it's important again to put on the record. I thank the government for responding to the 21st century need for electronic documents. Unfortunately, it takes a terrible tragedy such as the McAvoy accident for it to proceed, but on those points, I certainly do, on behalf of the caucus, the NDP caucus, support this piece of legislation.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of our justice critic, the honourable member from Richmond, we too in the Liberal caucus thank the government for bringing this forward. It is an important piece of legislation, and like our colleagues in the NDP, we agree that this is a bill that should go forward, and we support the bill.
Thank you. Question? Motion is for third reading on Bill number 12. Is the House ready for the question? Question. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried.
Bill 12, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 154 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Evidence Act.
Order that this bill do pass. Order that the title be read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 13, the Probate Act?
Bill number 13. The Honourable, the Minister responsible for health promotion and protection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Minister of Justice, I'm pleased to move Bill number 13, the Probate Act, for third reading.
Question? The motion is for third reading on Bill number 13. Is the House ready for the question? Question. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried.
Bill 13, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 31 of the Acts of 2000, the Probate Act.
Order that this bill do pass. Order that the title be read by the clerk. Order that this bill be engrossed. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 15, the Small Claims Court Act?
Bill number 15. The Honourable, the Minister responsible for health promotion and protection.
It's easy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of my colleague, the Minister of Justice, I'm pleased to move for third reading Bill number 15, the Small Claims Court Act.
Thank you. The question has been called. The motion is for third reading on Bill number 15. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried.
Bill 15, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 430 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Small Claims Court Act.
Order that this bill do pass. Order that the title be read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call public bills for second reading?
Is it, pardon me, could you?
Bills for second reading?
Bills for second reading?
Yes. Bill number 38, the Consumer Protection Act.
Okay. Private members' public bills. Bill number 38, the Consumer Protection Act. The Honourable Member for Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand in my place this evening to speak very briefly about Bill number 38. And I think I will start off by saying that gift certificates, gift cards are a convenience. They make good sense to a lot of shoppers, and they certainly make good sense and good business to a lot of stores in North America. I would say that probably this year alone, about 40% of Canadians will be shopping for gift cards and using gift cards, compared to, according to stats that I've received, somewhere well over 60% of Americans over the past year have used gift cards of some sort. Many stores, fortunately, have already taken upon themselves to eliminate expiry date on gift certificates. Unfortunately, such is not the case for all stores. I think what this bill is trying to do is that, with respect to gift certificates, is to see that consumers get their money's worth regardless of the timeline between the date of the purchase of the gift certificate from the time that they do cash it in. I also think that gift certificates make good sense from a store perspective, because I think probably for an example, Mr. Speaker, if I have a $100 gift certificate and I go to redeem that gift certificate, chances are that I'm going to spend more than the $100 than what the gift certificate is worth. So it's good business. It's good business for stores to also have gift certificates, and it also makes sense that if there was no expiry date, then that expenditure, although it's an immediate gain for the store for today, but also they got something to benefit from down the road when I spend beyond that $100, which would be beyond the value of the gift certificate itself. If this legislation passes, Mr. Speaker, we will be the third province in Canada to have such legislation. And I see that as an advantage because right now they have legislation in Ontario and they have legislation in Manitoba. We do know now from history that the legislation in Ontario has had some difficulties. We know that the legislation in Manitoba has been reconstructed so to avoid some of those same difficulties that they've experienced in Ontario. We have the luxury now of the benefit of that history. So as this Bill 38 moves on to law amendments, anybody from the public and from the business sector will be more than able to come forth and make any suggestions that they have with respect to the bill around amendments. This legislation is necessary to ensure that we as consumers and that we as Nova Scotians get value for our money. We work hard for our money. We know that money doesn't come easy for a lot of people. I know it's a very convenient. I know that gift certificates, just very briefly, I know about a year ago, well, I think it was longer than a year ago now, I had received a gift certificate from a family member. One of my sons gave me a gift certificate. And he lives outside the province, so with the cost of shipping things now, and gift certificates seemed a simple way for him to go. So he sends us a family gift certificate. And well beyond Christmas, I took the family out and we were going to cash in on this gift certificate. And we go to a local restaurant and we sit down, we have a nice meal, and lo and behold, when it came time to pay for the bill, I get the bill and I pull out the gift certificate, not reading the fine print, Mr. Speaker. It had an expiry date on it, which had expired. But the waitress kind of looked at me. She said, "Well, excuse me, sir, but this has expired." And I said, "Oh, well," I said, "Well, do you take a check?" And they said, "No, but just hold on. I'll go talk to the manager." Fortunately for me, the manager came out, and the manager, even though it was expired, honored the gift certificate, and which I was very, very pleased about. And to this very day, we continue to go to that store just because of that PR, just because of that public relations deal that they did for me that night. And certainly, I felt bailed out and enjoyed our. Actually, we stayed and we ate dessert because I was questioning. I was questioning, debating whether or not we should have dessert. But when I looked at the value of the gift certificate and the gesture of kindness by the manager, we stayed and we had dessert and had an enjoyable meal. And I just want to reiterate again is that if this bill goes on to third reading, goes on to law amendments, sorry, Mr. Speaker, that it certainly will give the public and businesses an opportune time to come in and express their concerns if they have any concerns over the legislation. And we can have the best legislation in Canada, and again, based on history. One of the things that I did find out very, very recently that 27%, Mr. Speaker, of the individuals, of that 62% that I mentioned earlier, 27% of the people in the U.S. that get gift certificates do not redeem them. Mr. Speaker, that is a contribution of $8 million to American business. $8 million. That's a huge contribution. And in Canada, we are certainly looking at, certainly because the population size of Canada, we contribute $100 million every year because we don't cash in gift certificates or it's expired and they're no longer valid. So I think that's another good reason for us to look at this legislation very, very seriously because, again, companies should not be able to profit without us getting a return for our dollar. And that's exactly what expiry dates do with gift certificates. Stores make, I think, and I've already mentioned how this makes good sense to stores, and I think it encourages people to shop at stores. And I think one of the things I want to mention is that if I buy a gift certificate for Christmas for a member of my family or for a friend, chances are when they redeem that gift certificate, well, it will be after Christmas. It'll be during the slow periods of the year when they need that additional revenue because I'm going to go beyond what the value of that gift certificate is. Because, Mr. Speaker, if that gift certificate is worth $100, in fact, if I only spend $50, I do not get $50 back. So I had to spend that other $50 at that store for the full value of the $100. And the chances are with HST, with provincial sales tax, and the prices of goods going up and up and up, is that I'm going to exceed the value of the gift certificate every time. So what gift certificates also do is they allow those stores during the off-peak times to pick up some added revenue. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to pass it on to other members of the House who may want to speak to this.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Consumer Protection Act is an important act in anything that we might be talking about the protection of consumers in this province, and this is no different. It's a good act. As a matter of fact, when you're talking about gift certificates, it's ironic that there would be some businesses who put expiry dates on it because, in fact, the gift certificate itself is paid for in advance. So the store owner already has his money, and if the person doesn't come back with it, then he's in that amount of money. But at least if the person should come back, they should be able to go back at any time in the future and get what's rightfully theirs, merchandise for the amount of money that they've already paid or somebody's paid on their behalf. So, the bill is a good one. We support the bill, and I'd like to see if there's going to be anybody come to law amendments on this bill. I doubt if the halls will be filled with people on this one, but certainly it's a good bill, and we support it.
Thank you. Are there further speakers? The Honourable Minister responsible for Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Speaker, and it pleases me to rise before the House to discuss the proposed amendments to Bill 38, the Consumer Protection Act. As members will know, Mr. Speaker, consumer protection is one of the main responsibilities of the Department of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. And the Consumer Protection Act and a number of other statutes are in place to provide Nova Scotians with protection against unfair, or at least perceived, perhaps unfair business practices. And I guess, Mr. Speaker, most of us in the House, particularly in the game in which we are working, can appreciate what removing the expiry date from gift cards would mean to Nova Scotia consumers, particularly at this time of the year. And I'm thinking one of the things, Mr. Speaker, is this is silent auction season. And most of us go to these silent auctions and inevitably buy something, and quite frequently it may be a gift card, which you never get to use. Now, the fact is with these silent auctions, the money's going to a good purpose, so it's not a big thing. But anyway, the other part of that is that I think at this time of year it's rather appropriate too, because many of us will be receiving gift cards over the holidays, as the member from Fall River Waverly Beaverbank said, and he was very fortunate that he met a very generous soul that would honor the certificate. I can tell you from a personal experience some time ago, which involves an agency which probably better I don't talk about here in the House. No, I didn't. They wouldn't honor it. Anyway. Finding out that a gift card is no longer valid when you go to pay for something is not a pleasant surprise. And, Mr. Speaker, what this amendment does, though, quite seriously, is it allows regulations on expiry dates to be developed. And over the past several years, gift cards have become a very popular choice with shoppers, particularly from the bigger retail chains. And a recent Statistics Canada study shows that over 80% of the large retailers offer gift cards, and it makes up for a significant amount of their holiday sales. Now, the Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations is continually reviewing the Consumer Protection Act to see that it accurately reflects practices found in the retail market. Business trends are always shifting, and it's important that this act does remain up to date to make sure that Nova Scotians are protected when they make purchases. Mr. Speaker, we've also been following what's been happening in other jurisdictions with gift cards, and I know that Ontario and Manitoba are in the process of putting in place regulations that limit the restrictions that retailers can place in gift cards, specifically concerning expiry dates. Mr. Speaker, consumer protection for Nova Scotia continues to be one of my department's main priorities, and we feel that Bill 38, the amendments to the Consumer Protection Act, is in line or are in line with the intention of the Act. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. I'll now recognize the honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank to close debate on Bill number 38 and move second reading, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you allow me a little leeway here, since this is my first bill to come in front of the House, so I want to enjoy the moment while I can. But having said that, I certainly want to pass my thanks on to the minister and also to my Liberal colleague for their endorsement of this bill. I'd like to move closing of second reading and allow Bill 38 proceed to law amendments.
Thank you. The motion is for second reading on Bill number 38. Is the House ready for the question? Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 38, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 92 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Consumer Protection Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 54, the Maintenance Enforcement Act?
Private Members' Public Bills, Bill number 54, Maintenance Enforcement Act. The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bill number 54 attempts to deal with an issue which I know we all as MLAs on occasion face in our office. On many occasions when that telephone call comes the first time and you answer the phone, I can tell you I can sense the frustration in people's voices when I hear from an injured worker. That injured worker is frustrated, angry, concerned about the process and the delays which he or she has faced. I also hear other concerns, of course, at times when I hear, usually from women, when they bring up the magical words of the Maintenance Enforcement Program. And for those particular women in many cases, although I want you to know that on one occasion I did deal with a student of mine who had the responsibility of his own children, and he was dealing with a lady who was not contributing her necessary dollars each month. You sense the frustration and the concern in the Maintenance Enforcement Program. Now, I want to be very clear on this. This is no reflection on the people who work at Maintenance Enforcement. When I have the opportunity to deal with people at Maintenance Enforcement, I find the staff to be professional, I find them to be prompt, I find them to be very concerned about the backlog and the delays which they're facing. But on many occasions they've said to me, you know, Bill, my hands are just tied. We don't have the flexibility to be able to proceed with some of the things that you're asking for in Maintenance Enforcement, particularly when it's someone who lives in another province, in some cases lives in another country, and we get into jurisdictions between one province and another province. Now, to me, as a school teacher, I don't want to hear the legalities of what's right or what's wrong. I want the problem solved, and I want this young mother, along with her children, to make sure that she has access to the funds which she needs to continue to live. Thus the concern that we hear on many occasions when it comes to maintenance enforcement. And I've heard from members of my caucus who've brought this issue to my concern and to my attention before. Bill 54, the amended Maintenance Enforcement Act, gives the Director of Maintenance Enforcement additional powers to obtain information from the courts, Mr. Speaker, that may assist the enforcement of maintenance orders. This legislation is in response to the June 2007 report from the Provincial Auditor General into the state of maintenance enforcement in Nova Scotia. At that time, the AG made a number of recommendations, in total 18 of them. We are dealing with one, and this is an important one for this caucus, and it's an important one for anyone in Nova Scotia who's been involved with maintenance enforcement. The amendment specifically addresses recommendation 5.6 of the Auditor General's report. In interviews with the staff of maintenance enforcement, the Auditor General heard that maintenance orders issued by courts often do not include, and I would like to read this into the record, Mr. Speaker. The Auditor General heard that maintenance orders issued by the courts often do not include information such as social insurance numbers, employment information, business ownership, personal financial information, and other information which could assist in the enforcement of maintenance orders. This amendment, if passed, as it goes through this stage and over to law amendments, this amendment would ensure that such information will be included in future maintenance orders. It would include thereby strengthening the administration and the enforcement of maintenance orders. It's important that the courts make as much information available to the maintenance enforcement program as possible. We cannot assume this information is available because of the technicality and the jurisdictions which sometimes we have to face. The AG also goes on in his report when he asks the department to review and assess the managerial needs of the program and apply sufficient resources and expertise to effectively and efficiently manage the program. The people who work at maintenance enforcement are professional. They have a concern for every one of their clients, but in many cases, as you know, Mr. Speaker, and other members of this House know, they just have too many of them. So as legislators, we have a responsibility to make their job as easy and as accessible as possible. This is what this amendment will do. It will allow the people who work at maintenance enforcement to do their job in a more effective manner. The minister also claimed in the House last week that progress is being made in reducing the cases in arrears, and I'm glad to hear that. I hope the minister fulfills the commitment that he gave to me in the House, that he will provide the information for the cases that are being cleared up in the proverbial backlog. We strongly in our caucus encourage the House to support this amendment. This amendment makes common sense. It will be an asset to those affected. It will be an asset for the professionals in maintenance enforcement, and it will be an asset for the people of Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Are there further speakers? The Honourable, the member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you. It is with honour that I move the second reading to Bill number 54.
Thank you. Is the House ready for the question? Motion is for second reading on Bill number 54. Will all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried.
Bill 54, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 6 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Maintenance Enforcement Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask consent of the House that you do rise and leave the chair, and the House resolve itself into Committee of the whole House on Bills.
Will all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. please. The Committee of the Whole House on Bill is now called to order. The Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you please call Bill number 24, the Dental Hygienist Act?
Bill number 24.
No amendments?
No amendments. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Yeah, I'm going to recommend. Okay. The Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you please call Bill number 31, the Medical Act?
Bill number 31, the Medical Act.
Is that in there by mistake?
Bill number 31. Question has been called. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Carry. Bill 31. Okay. The Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please call Bill number 45, the Companies Act.
Bill number 45, the Companies Act. Question has been called. Shall the clause carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? Here's Bill 24. Okay. 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 All right. Thank you. There you go. There you go. Okay. The Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask that you, the Committee of the Whole House on Bills, do rise and report progress.
Is it agreed? Agreed. Order, please.
The chairman of the Committee of the Whole House on Bills reports the committee has met, considered 3 bills, numbers 24, 31, 45, and the chairman's been instructed to recommend them to the favorable consideration of the House, each without amendment.
Order that these bills be read a third time on a future day. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move that we take a short recess.
Is it agreed? Agreed.
Agreed.
The House will recess for a short recess. Thank you.